So thank you so much for joining. Welcome to a meetup. We haven't had one in quite a while for SDN Dallas, as Brandon kind of mentioned earlier. We've been a little bit busy planning the SDN Global Conference, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Also, as always, we'd like to engage in the chat. So as you have questions or anything rise up, please drop them in the chat. Let us know what's going on. I want to thank our all-time forever sponsors since we started this group. Slalom and Precocity have been sponsoring these meetup events since the very beginning. And also just recognizing the team that's kind of been here since the very beginning. You might notice that we are missing our favorite Frenchman, Greg, who is traveling for some family business this week. So we hope him safe travels, and we're going to do our best to host with him out. And then also want to note again, if you have not already followed us on YouTube, please, by all means, go check it out. We have archived all of our videos from the very beginning, starting with Mr. Stickdorn. So you can go back and recap on some of the conversations and interviews that we've had in the past. Really had a great time with those. And this event, of course, will also be posted there shortly. As I mentioned, engaging through the chat. So we actually use that. We curate any questions that come from the group and surface them up to our guests at any point. It helps us if you tee it off with a question to guest or rather than just a comment to engage the rest of the chat. If you've been to one of our meetups before, you kind of know how it works. And we usually try to get to those towards the end. As I had mentioned, Service Design Global Conference is coming. We're very close now. It's coming up in October. It's going to be right here in Dallas, Texas. Very excited. Couple of folks on the phone here have been involved in planning that. And we have got an incredible lineup. If you haven't already seen information about it on LinkedIn, by all means, look it up or reach out to us in the chat. We'll send you all the information in the world. I am also understanding that we have a discount code specifically for the event today that Brandon has just shared through the chat. If you have not already gotten your ticket, feel free to use that code. We just posted there for 10% discount. It does have a shelf life. So September 15th, that code will no longer be viable. So definitely do it quickly if you can. We're very excited, and this counts for both virtual and in-person tickets, that we would love to see you in person here in Dallas. And of course, those of you in Dallas, I hope you're already got your tickets and you're coming. All right, today's topic, very exciting stuff here. We've actually got a fantastic group of young service designers, new service designers, folks that are up and coming in the field and want to share with us some of their thoughts, how they got into the field. So this is a really exciting topic to me. You'd love to see an industry and a practice continue to grow and thrive and bring more folks to it. So I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation, teeing up some of the things that we'll be talking about at the conference with business transformation and the future of service design and the way things are going. If what is the future of service design look like? Well, it looks like an AI generated office with a whole lot of blue, but in reality, what is the future looking like? If you think about the evolution of tools, the evolution of skills, what things are consistent, what things might shift as we're looking forward, and who are the folks that are acting as service designers in this place, their backgrounds. Oh, let me try. Here we go. So I'm going to allow our four guests here to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their backgrounds as we get into the questions. So I'll pass it over to you, Leah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leah. I'm from Zagreb. I'm a designer and I have my own agency here, but also connected to the Service Design Network. I'm one of the 4 members of Young Talent Board, which is specifically engaging for the next generation of service designers.
All right, Katrina.
Katrina. Yeah, sorry, I should have.
Sorry, you can't see
Okay,
that. Yeah.
both.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katrina. I'm a principal experience strategist and service designer in Slalom. I've been here for about 4.5 years, been practicing service design for about 7, after a short career in interior design, believe it or not. And super excited to talk to you all today. Oh, and I'm coming to you from Boston, and I'll pass it over to Julia.
Thank you, Katrina. And also, I did not know that about you, so I'm excited to hear more. Hi, everybody. I am Julia. I am based in Michigan, and I also am at Slalom with my pals Katrina and Naman, an experience strategy and design consultant here and a member of the Service Design Center of Excellence. So I'm really excited. Actually, Katrina, it just kind of led into that. Through my time in design, I've just learned that everyone has sort of a unique path and story to share about how they entered the field, how they navigated the field as they gained experience. So I'm eager to learn more about that interior design, as well as hear from my other friends' backgrounds and diverse experiences. So thank you for having me, and I hope to see some of you in October in Dallas.
Hi,
Naman.
everyone. Hi, everyone. My name's Naman. I, like Julia, am also calling in from Michigan. I'm a service designer and a researcher at Slalom with a focus on accessibility and inclusive design. My background is actually in mechanical engineering. So I transitioned from mechanical engineering into design and now into service design. Just really excited to be here with all of you today and share the stage with my 4 friends here, or 3 friends here.
And thank you all for taking some time out of your days to join as well. I know we pulled this together a little quickly, but this is going to be a fantastic conversation. I'm going to dive right into our opening questions. That's sort of a good starting point. This is a question I'm often asked as well. How did you find service design? How did you, manage learning about it? Or were you, do you have training, or was there anything going on that clued you into what is service design? Even my own story, I didn't know anything about design when I was in school until I learned about classes that made sense. And so I imagine everyone's got a similar kind of path how they found it. So I'd love to hear from each of you, um, sort of your origin stories. How about we open with Leah?
Oh, I guess I'm the only one that I didn't share my background. But I actually started from industrial design here in Croatia. If you ask me, in Croatia, well, we still don't have service design. So if anybody asks, you're doing design. So I always present myself as a designer, and that's kind of enough. But I was writing my master's thesis, and it was in the context of breast cancer. And I started to, well, try to figure out what would be the best solution in my eyes when I was writing a master thesis. And I quickly realized that one product hardly can fight a system, specifically that type of a system. So I came to Cologne, where I had Birgit Mager as my mentor, and then quickly, well, she kind of shifted me to service design, and I realized that's definitely much, much closer that what I was looking for and closer to the solution that I was thinking. Of course, you cannot beat cancer, but you can create a community or service around it that could fight much, much better than one product. But currently, that shifted me again in completely another direction, merging a lot of skills. But my agency is primarily now working in user experience, but marketing. So service design is one part of all of the things that I do, and still industrial design is also in my heart. So it's kind of a mixture of everything.
That's fantastic. Yeah, similar path as well from ID, and many folks I've met to transition from ID into service. There's probably a study there in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Julia, yeah, Julia, how about any thoughts?
Yeah, my story's long, but I'll keep it short-ish. So I started actually in human resources, was not qualified for the job, was not very good at the job. But really where my like discovery of design happened was more about with UX. And so I'll save that long part of the story, but I went to a master's program to do formal education in UX once I discovered it. So I went to University of Michigan, studied at their School of Information, and had a concentration in UX research and design. And a way that a lot of the group assignments were structured were small group, paired with a client, problem solve, present your work at the end. And through that, that sort of led me to now my career that has been spent in consulting ever since I just entered the design field. So I entered consulting to get sort of that breadth of design work to really explore, do I want to do research? Do I want to do UI? Do I want to do design systems? And consulting really allowed me to try out different projects. And so I didn't discover service design so much as I sort of realized I discovered more about myself and what I like to do as an experienced designer, where my strengths and interests are, what sort of like level and where on the design spectrum I like to fit. And then service design really fit that bill. So now, since then, I've been continuing to work on service design projects to try and really sharpen my skills in some of those areas that maybe school didn't necessarily teach me, learn a bit more business acumen and the like. So yeah, a long story, but that's sort of the short of it.
I wonder, those in the audience too, similar stories or similar paths. You could share a brief in the chat. We can connect on that level. Katrina, tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure, yeah. So I always knew that I wanted to be in design in some form. I actually have a lot of design influences in my family, also from the industrial design world and the architecture and interior space. So when I was looking to kind of formally pursue my education, I looked at a lot of these interdisciplinary design programs. There wasn't a lot out there that was formally promoting itself as service design, but I found myself kind of focusing on as many things as I could at the same time in the design space. And then over time, realizing that service design was such a perfect place to kind of bring all those skills together and look at design in this really holistic way. So I did, leave school practicing commercial interior architecture and design strategy sort of in combination. But over time, I always joked we dealt with all these organizations who were trying to kind of transform themselves, and somehow the solution was always by transforming their space. And I found myself kind of wanting to think about other ways that we could really affect change in organizations that wasn't just like from an architectural or spatial perspective. So over a number of years kind of transitioned and upskilled into service design and design strategy more formally through a mixture of, mentors and classes and self-teaching and different skills, sort of finding myself where I am today now, doing a lot of service design and strategy work, often in the healthcare arena in Boston. So it's sort of a abbreviated version of my story.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I so much to connect with on that. I want to dive into all of these subjects, but I know we have many questions to get to, and I want to hear from Nelman as well. Go ahead, Nelman.
Yeah, I'll take you back to 1995. No, I'm kidding. I'm not gonna go that far. So my journey into service design started with an engineering degree. I was 17 at the time. I had to make a decision on what I wanted to study, and unlike Katrina, I didn't have any sort of design influence in my life. All of it was in STEM. A lot of it was in engineering. So that's what I picked, and then, went through a bachelor's and then a master's in mechanical engineering, realized that I really missed interacting with people because so much of it was to deal with mechanics and machines and the theory of engineering. So after I graduated, I found a job in the automotive industry, but on the side, I started volunteering for an organization called Open IDEO, which used to be IDEO's open innovation arm. And that's where I picked up a lot about human-centered design, started facilitating workshops for people, which was a great way for me to develop my skills and expertise in design as well. And then just continued volunteering with various organizations, ended up finding a role at the intersection of engineering and UX with an automotive company. And that was kind of how I officially started segueing into a career in design, which now has transitioned into, combining design with my passion for inclusive design. So a lot of what I think about is how do we make our services and our processes more inclusive, not only in terms of the touch points between customers and services and businesses, but also within businesses and their processes as a whole.
That's fantastic. I'm hearing a common path to is sort of chasing an energy or chasing a passion and finding your way to a role or a title, if you will, that kind of meets that sort of need across the board, whether it's the impact or it's the type of work kind of thing. There's something to that. I think we're gonna move to the next set of questions here, Brandon, if you want to take these on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, as the slide said, what is missing. So for the group, what skills or topics felt underrepresented when you were training, things you had to learn along the way? I mean, some went to school, some did certificates, some went to programs, etc. You got some mentorship, but what was missing? Let's jump in with Naman.
This one's a little tough for me to answer because, I did transition into service design. Like, I don't have as much of a formal education and such. So I think that for me, a lot of how I pursued service design education was through um, like YouTube videos and reading books and meeting with people and trying to gather as much knowledge as I could through my interactions with folks. And actually, a big part of that was being on a project with one of my Solemn colleagues who has had years of practice in service design. And through him learning how to, even doing things like creating service blueprints, how to map all of these different ecosystems and interactions within the context that we were operating in. And so applying it through my work was really how I gained a lot of my knowledge and my expertise in service design. But I'd love to hear from others here on how they would respond to this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Naman. And I think there are different groupings across the different age groups, right? For some of us on the north side of the age spectrum, right, a lot of it was this same learning by doing. Or you started out and you did a career pivot. So Katrina, you talked about how you started out in one career and you pivoted to the other. As you found yourself pivoting, what things felt underrepresented or that you had to learn along the way?
Yeah, happy to chat about that. I will say I feel like every piece of my career journey has kind of taught me a core skill that I've been able to bring forward. And I think that's true across a lot of different design disciplines. It's not like they're so compartmentalized that you can't apply the learnings from, what you might have done in an industrial design education and bring it into a sort of service design lens. And I've definitely done that a lot along the way. Um, but in terms of what has felt like it was missing in education or internships, I feel like the opportunity to kind of have independent ownership of a project and the outcomes of something that you're working toward is really valuable. And oftentimes, particularly in like design internship type settings, you might just be focused on a few tasks in isolation. And I think it's so powerful to be assigned really a project of your own to understand how all the pieces fit together, especially in something like service design. I did an internship for a company once where basically their internship program was pretty unique and every intern had their own project. And so your entire experience was just crafted around being embedded with a team, sort of doing that design work, but you were managing your own outcome of that work stream. And it was just a really powerful way to learn that I wish that we saw more of, and people kind of going through that process. The one other thing I'll add about what I feel like might be lacking a little bit in formal education is just occasionally, I think academia can lag behind professional practice to a degree. I think, sometimes you're taught in school case studies that are really well known or well studied, and they're not always on the cutting edge of what's happening out in the real world. So I'm a huge advocate of kind of, make sure that you're invested in the formal training and all these things that we all, learn collectively, the design of everyday things and all those things that we treat as foundational. But don't be afraid of kind of also keeping your eye on the news and podcasts and things that are a little bit more just emerging to have that more well-rounded perspective as you try to learn about this field.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Leo or Julie, did you want to chime in on this one? If not, we can jump to the next one.
Oh, actually, I wanted to build up on what Katrina said. I agree totally with what you're referring to, academia being very focused, not having all of the pieces together. And when you mention leaving someone to take over a project, it could teach them so much about how many different things you need to have in mind while solving specific problem. Because I feel that academia often focuses on a lot of frameworks because they need to set up strong foundations. And that's okay, obviously, because you're just starting and you need something to grasp. If someone comes to you and say, "Oh, you will need to know so many things," I guess people will go run and maybe change the field very, very often. But the biggest thing I feel that is lacking in academia is this broad mindset of everything what's awaiting for you, and not only a lot of frameworks that you will need to improvise a lot to solve different problems and solutions. And I also really like what Naman said about how he chose this field because he missed dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people, you have so many different things to deal with that some basic frameworks will never help you to resolve some problems.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. That's really huge. And as we go and as we learn, I think it's really critical to understand that every learning path is different. And where we come from doesn't mean where we're going is any different. My master's program was built around the fact that everybody came from some other place. And we took technology and merged that with whatever the thing was. So we had former priests, and we had clowns, and we had musicians, and programmers, and everybody kind of brought whatever it was they brought to the table, merged that with technology. And I love that about service design as well, and the paths that I've seen people take, whether it be industrial or mechanical or interior, all of these things combining with empathy and an understanding of humans and how humans move through space, how humans experience things, I think is really, really critical. So I think the path that you take or the education that you have is less critical so much as take a path and build that educational path for yourself like you guys have done. I think that's fantastic. Um, let's go back to Katrina. If you could redesign service design education or internships, what would you change?
Hmm. Well, I didn't do the formal service design education myself, but I was chatting with a couple colleagues in preparation for this call who did, and just trying to get a little bit of their perspective. And a couple things come to mind. I mean, for one thing, comparing sort of what we do in working on a project versus what we might have done in school, I think oftentimes you are faced with problems, but not the steps to solve them. And I think better preparing, students or people that are trying to kind of switch disciplines to be faced with those types of challenges is key. I think a lot of the time you get a project in school where you're going through the design thinking process or the double or triple diamond process, and all of your requirements are sort of written out, all the deliverables and expectations. But a lot of the time, the work that we get, or at least just sort of speaking for myself in the consulting arena, you're faced with a large challenge. We need you to improve the experience for these types of patients, and you just sort of have to be ready and eager to begin with that level of ambiguity, and think about how you can bring all the tools in your toolbox that you've been collecting that kind of I don't know, thinking about a framework for yourself. And I think that that's something that we could do a little bit better when we think about how to train people up in service design. Is sort of really preparing them for the ambiguity that's going to come.
Fantastic. Julia, did you have any comments on this particular thread?
She's muted. Grid.
Oh, do I need to re-add? Apologies.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I think like I'm kind of jumping in here on the end of this, but talking about just like underrepresented in training or in education. I think one of the biggest parts or like sort of the biggest gaps that I faced when transitioning into more service design roles is really just that business acumen and being able to sort of speak the language of business. I think when I was in school, it was a lot about problem solving, a lot about focusing on the users, and got really, really good at that and being human centered, but also just always being able to tie things to business outcomes to be able to use that in storytelling. I think that education today could really focus on that. And I think there's a ton of opportunity when you're at these universities that have business schools that have all of these specialties to really collaborate with design schools and work together on that. Also, just quantitative data, anything to do with that. The UX program I did was very focused on qualitative. So I've definitely had to self upskill in anything to do with numbers.
Yeah,
But
the quant side is so critical, and it's the least accessible to me anyway. And hiring great quant people is super critical, and then becoming a quant person yourself.
Yeah.
When if you went to design school or art school or something, and all of a sudden somebody's asking you to build statistical analyses in Excel, right? You're like, wait a minute, I thought I was a designer. What's going on? So I think that's huge. Thanks for pointing that out. Let's move on to the
I
next.
just have a thought.
Oh, go
Hold on,
for it.
Brandon. I just have a thought. I want to push on that just a little bit when we talk about things like, okay, quant capabilities or qual capabilities or those and their methodologies or their tool sets. Where I'm actually wondering what the panel thinks about, the pendulum tends to swing over the years in design education programs, ID, SD, you name it, whether it's craft focus or we swing back the other way and it's methodology focus or um, most emerging new thing, new tool kind of focus. And I'm wondering about more the commonality around critical thought, right? That ability to know that you need quant or know that you need to dig a little more on qual or know that maybe there's something here that we can't see because it's too new or it's too we're piecing together too much abstract information. Just curious about when we're thinking about design programs and what are we setting people up to do when they get to their job. I see your hand, Katrina.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question, Robin, because I remember when I was doing my program back in school, I was kind of resentful that they didn't focus more of the curriculum on learning software and tools. For one thing, because I felt like we were really unprepared upon graduation to jump into the workforce and just be effective and efficient out of the gate because we hadn't learned them, we didn't feel comfortable in them. But as I've gotten further in my career, I've learned that learning how to learn is so much more important than learning the concrete tools of the day. I feel like, every couple years you're needing to just look at the new landscape of tools and methods and kind of adapt to that. And people that have been resistant to that change, I think, are the ones that are kind of falling behind. So learning how to learn and valuing that more than being the expert in any given tool of the day is hugely important. And then to your comment about leaning more into craft versus methodology, I think it's such an important balance. And I think it can be tough in service design and how much complexity we're wrangling to still bring in that element of creativity and sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, more traditional design that really is more about just more than analyzing what you're looking at and trying to find efficiency and really trying to look at things in new ways, like still bringing in that design element, that innovative thinking. So I'm always trying to remind myself to keep that in the back of my brain when we hit a service design challenge.
Fantastic answer. All right, I think we can move on to the next. All right. Well, let's actually get into, now we're transitioning out of education. Now we're into our working world. What kind of industries draw you the most? And how about Naman, if you want to talk to us about that?
Yeah. This is my personal favorite question, because it was, a couple of years ago, I was staffed on a project within the public sector, and it's just something that like was an instant love. I was like, this is where I want to spend the rest of my life, and it's the kind of work that I am drawn to the most to, for a couple of reasons. I think one is just the scale of impact that we as designers can create through our work within the public sector is huge, but also specifically around thinking about accessibility and inclusive design, just based on how laws and regulations are in play. There's a good entry point for projects and opportunities within accessibility and inclusive design within the public sector. But also as we start thinking more holistically about, not public sector services not being standalone siloed things, but working more in relationship with others and multiple agencies interacting with each other. Um, Having service design at the center of that allows us to look at those relationships. And then for me specifically, through the lens of inclusive design. And so that's why I'm really drawn to it.
How about Katrina? You want to talk about your passion space?
I'm really passionate about working in healthcare personally. Being in Boston, there's so much pharma, biotech just around us. I think it's sort of happened accidentally that as a consultant, that's most of the work that we end up getting. But I think, it's natural that all of us love to feel like the design work that we're doing is having an impact on real people. And there's so many opportunities working with hospitals and different sort of companies around here to really see how you're impacting change, whether it's a product or the way that a service is delivered. And I've always been passionate about that.
Impact is an interesting one that seems to be, a topic that comes up for design organizations constantly, right? Talking about the value of what we do. I think as you guys have illustrated, we very internalize our passion. Yes, I want to do this thing. I believe I'll have an impact on this, or I can see it. And sometimes we have to talk about how they're like, prove it. Or we have to show it, or almost like we have to lead our partners to that realization that maybe we see a little more clearly. Does anybody have some thoughts on that, on kind of connecting the dots between the impact that you want to have and then the impact that you're able to show? Maybe that's too heady. All right, Katrina, go for it if you want to take it.
I could just add on to what I had said with one little anecdote. I was working on a product last year, and we were just doing like, standard qualitative research interviews to get a sense of how it was performing. And one of the users of our product was saying, this is the first time I have ever felt listened to in my healthcare journey. And obviously, it was a huge team effort, and so many different disciplines outside of design went into making that happen. But just being able to see that and know that that's what you were working on and that's what it ended up working toward is super powerful. So I just wanted to share that story.
Yeah, I love that. Like goosebumps when you said it too, because every time I've heard that, that's like, the endorphin hit that I think we get when we've tapped into something or, shared a voice that doesn't get heard otherwise. Fantastic. Leah.
Oh yeah, I actually also have two situations where I guess you can see the impact through your work very quickly. It was also in a public sector, working with hospitals. And this is, by the way, also my favorite field, Katrina and Aman. I agree with you on public sectors and hospitals. We were building a website and wayfinding system for one of the biggest hospitals in Croatia, and their name is Mercury. So obviously you want to see and you sit in a waiting room, watch people how they try to find their way in the hospital. It's very interesting. And you build this wayfinding system. You believe that it's that will help people, but you don't see exact impact on it because, well, some manage better, some manage less better, but it's not so much regarding to you, but different personalities and different type of people that you find in the hospitals. But we added to this wayfinding system some little interactions throughout the hospital so we could maybe easen up all of the process for the patients there. And one of the things that we made, so the name of the hospital is Mercury, and we decided to take one wall and call it the Milky Way of the hospital. So every person who has a newborn baby should take a star and write their stars, their baby's name, newborn's baby, and the date. And we just let it be. And they told me, oh, the nurses won't give it to parents. It will be difficult, blah, blah, blah. We are not sure. And I say, let's try it. We just put the name Milky Way, put your star there. I think already on that wall, you can see 300 stars in the last 2 months. And it's the cutest thing ever. People are so excited. They're putting stars, and it's just a very nice way of seeing how people love this little interactions. And everybody said everybody's super excited when they get a star, stick it on the wall. So I guess that was one of the most exciting things I did lately, and it's a very simplified way of seeing how people react to what you create in the space.
That's beautiful. I was just imagining now a moment years from now when a new mom maybe places the star for their child next to their star,
Yeah.
right? Down the
Yeah.
line, you can see how I guess that. Sorry, don't mean to
Yeah.
cause anybody to cry. Julia, how about you tell us a little bit about how you're building your skills today?
Gosh, I just feel so warm and fuzzy right now. And also, I'm glad that you asked me this second question because my answer to the first is public sector and healthcare.
Yeah.
So I guess we're all pretty aligned on our interests.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and you guys know where I work too, so yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah.
But I think an answer to both sort of is I think both those industries, everything everyone said, but also they're just wildly complex, which I think in the role of the designer, you really have to know how to collaborate with other disciplines and also make sure that any work you're doing is also mindful of the bigger picture in any work anybody else is doing. So actually, I am really lucky right now to be on a project that is the intersection of education and healthcare. I'm really loving it. And I think it's really been a challenge and a skill building opportunity to do exactly that. It requires a ton of stakeholder partnership. It requires a ton of our team just being on the same track with what we're proposing and making sure there's always continuity. So, um, yeah, another another flavor to it. But I just want to say, like, yes, and to everything everyone else said. I think those industries and being able to make that impact is super, super powerful.
Absolutely. And what's your go-to right now or your skill building of choice?
Just doing it. Is that an answer? I think there's
Yeah.
really some things, like, you just have to learn on the job. You have to make
Mm.
mistakes. You have to get the reps trying it out, and I think being in that complex environment and being that designer at the center of it, needing to bring it all together in a cohesive story, I really think that is the best way to learn. I wish I had a better answer. I would love to hear others' answers.
Yeah. Naman, you got any thoughts on this one?
I think I just echo a lot of what Julia said. For me, just and that's just based on how I started transitioning into design, because so much of it was, learning by doing, that it's something that's been successful for me and has worked well in the past. So I'm like, why stop now? But it's also been the more that I've been able to embed myself within the service design community, it's also been helpful to learn how others are learning. Because for me at the time, it was, I was reading every book I could find. I was listening to every podcast that I could find. But now, knowing that I want to focus in on, let's say inclusive design, or let's say service design, having conversations with people and understanding where they're accessing resources, if there are any specific books or podcasts or things that they're listening to, has just made the learning more intentional and targeted as I've evolved as a designer.
I'm hearing an embrace of a learning mindset as opposed to a knowing mindset. Yeah, I wonder if we tie this back to, education preparation and what you need to have coming out. There's probably something to that there of rather everything you need to know when you come out as opposed to how to find out the things you need to know when you come out, or at least you have that comfort with the discomfort of not knowing how to do that. Well, I guess I'll try. We'll just try it and improve on it. Yeah. Oh, failure feedback. Exactly. Yes. 100%. Well, let's actually transition right there because I think where that leads my thoughts actually takes us to the next round of questions. When we talk about failure and feedback and moving and being successful in a role, let's talk about challenges and career concerns right now. And Brandon, I'm taking this one for you, but we'll just transition into it. So yeah, what are kind of concerns that you're considering right now in the field, service design, design strategy, the areas where you guys work? What are you guys seeing going on? How about Leah?
Oof, oh, well, I'm gonna start some of the global concerns I have for the next generation of designers and maybe kind of shift to the personal one later. But for the global, what I'm seeing through SDN Youngstown Board Network and what's happening is, well, the market situation in Europe is very bad. I don't know how it's in America, but in Europe is very bad, and people are finding very difficult a lot of difficulties finding a job. So they apply to hundred places and they get a lot of rejection notes. Well, different reasons, but mainly I heard are the language barriers, getting a visa, not having enough money to go to a different country, and your own country doesn't have opportunities that you're looking for. So I would say those are the biggest problems, and I am concerned about their mindsets because a lot of people are falling to depressive thoughts because they need to return home to their home countries and then they feel as a failure because they were not considered for a job position because some reasons that I don't think should define you as a language barrier because that doesn't define your skill sets. So you will feel bad, you will find depressive, be depressed to come back to your home and then maybe stop valuing your skill sets as you do and then take up jobs that are maybe easier to for this transitioning and easily stay in that field that's not fulfilling your full potential. So that's something we saw a lot in the network and why people love to join the conferences to just get together and have some community support and realize that everybody is going through the same thing currently. So I would say that's my biggest concern for the market in general. And going to the personal level of on the other side, having working from a small agency and trying to find people to join the team is again we're gonna lose so many potentials. Maybe we won't get high quality people because they're lost in that whole process, and then not have good quality teams and critical thinkings that we all mention now as as part of the problem solving and in general in the company. So that's kind of the global perspective that could affect the company owners and hiring, as I see it as like a very, very big challenge and problem currently.
Absolutely. That is, yeah, I've faced that struggle myself of finding fantastic talent that I'm unable to hire in some cases
Yeah.
in some of my previous roles, um, due to reasons, right? You can list a bunch of them, but yeah, that is a big challenge. How about on the personal level?
Well, more on the personal level, what I'm afraid of is, well, again, the situation is in Europe is very bad. So not only that we cannot find good talents, which is the consequence of the thing that I was mentioning before, and that we cannot hire. On the other hand, is this the budgets are much lower. The time frames are much lower, so you need to be super fast paced in how are you doing projects. So, for example, the one that I mentioned with the stars, this is something that I was pushing at the end. I was saying, guys, please, this is my additional time. It's not paid. Please, let's do it. Please, let's do it. Let's create some sort of impact. And it was not in the first overview and tender, because in Croatia, most of the projects, especially in public services, are going around the tenders, which is to protect the companies to get a lot of offers. But what is actually on the table is they're accepting the lowest offers because that's by law. So you get low quality people to do on public services, and you as a company, if you want to do something well better, but this is not a new problem. I would say a lot of companies are facing the same thing, is you cannot put your time and effort because time is money, and then you have no money, you have no time, and you cannot put a star on the wall except if it's your company and you say, I'm doing it, I don't care about the budgeting, I'm just gonna put the star on the wall. So yeah, I would say that's my personal biggest issue at the moment.
Yeah, I think with the trends towards whether you call it agile or velocity or innovation mindset or those kinds of things, I think we are constantly fighting for time to do what we do or the process or to learn or to validate or so many steps along the way. Um, how about Julia? Any thoughts on challenges here that you've seen?
Yeah, I see Avery called out hoping AI comes up in this, so we can address that. There's a lot I could say about that in general, but I think in terms of this, just business leaders being more short-sighted about what AI can do. I don't think it's going to take our jobs completely, but in the short term, it definitely has impacted just availability of work, which makes it a really hard time to be discovering the specialty that you want to dive more into. It's, I want to do more service design in this industry. Well, you're going to do design in this industry of a different sort is kind of the reality of that. So really just like pulling back that investment from business leaders and everything that you all said about just the constant fight against enough time and resources to be able to do design well. I think that's probably just an ongoing thing. I don't know if that's unique to this time, but definitely do feel that as a challenge right now, and just makes me concerned for just future growth and doing the things I want to do.
Any other contributions, Katrina, Nauman?
Yeah, one thing to add, thinking about, challenges right now, people might be a little bit sick of hearing about this, but now that we're kind of in the post-COVID era and everyone's feeling pretty securely hybrid a lot in our industry, I think there is something lost in not having more in-person time together as design teams when you're trying to kind of emerge into this career. Something that I'm really passionate about when I've been sort of coaching and mentoring younger designers is bring them into the room, even if they're not going to be actively contributing to that specific conversation. Like, I think it's so important to be able to show people how the work that they're doing, the tasks that they're working on are contributing and laddering up to the bigger picture. And I think that kind of perspective just really impacts like how invested you are in the work and how you're able to kind of start connecting dots earlier. And there were a couple managers that I had early in my career who, if they were going to a really important meeting and I had absolutely not enough experience to participate, but they said, why don't you come and just take notes? Why don't you be in the room and understand what you're doing? And I always try to bring that forward when I'm working with people that are learning. And I just think there's less opportunity to do that now that we're all kind of in separate worlds. You have to make a much more intentional effort to bring someone in and maybe sort of introduce them. And, it's a little bit harder to just do that more discreetly. But I think it's something that we really need to remember and sort of bring that energy into working with younger designers and employers.
Yeah, the in-person and remote question, it keeps getting tapped. There's so many companies that are going 100% back in person, in office, and companies that are still embracing remote work. There's studies that probably advocate for both sides of that coin. I agree with you, Katrina. I think in our field, in particular, with collaboration and work sessions, there's something lost in the virtual world that we don't, that you get when you're all face to face or in a room working through something. But at the same time, there's some things that the virtual world gives you that you can't always achieve in the virtual world. It's kind of it feels like the scale tends to move a lot. Any other thoughts on concerns or um, thoughts for senior folks or employers to understand about new designers?
I have a thought. And this might touch on things that Julia and Katrina and Leah also said to an extent. And it's one concern is AI, right? And not so much AI as a technology, but how it's being used. And I'll specifically talk about research because that's what a lot of my focus tends to be. Um, I think, with AI or with research, there's a certain level of rigor that goes into conducting high quality research, right? Which is what makes researchers because we've trained for it, we've gotten the reps and such. And I think with the emergence of AI, I'm seeing examples of research being accelerated to a degree where that rigor is being lost. And I think, looking at industries such as public sector, right, where solutions, when scaled, affect thousands, millions of people, um, that rigor is necessary to understand the full extent of diversity and nuances that are part of the human experience. And my fear is that once we start talking about AI as an accelerator for research, we're losing those nuances and diversity. And that's also tied to my personal career concerns is, am I as a researcher going to essentially become someone who has to rely on AI tools to deliver on projects because I can't meet the speed at which projects need to take place because I'm not ready to give up on research rigor. Um, I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's what comes to mind for me.
It's connecting for me for sure. I think thinking of AI unleashed, right? AI just all onto itself, and we just take for granted whatever it says is the gospel, and it is the way to move forward. I think there's a big problem with that. It goes back to that critical thinking aspect of a human curating what is learned, or a human, whether the human's doing the interview or connecting with the interviewee and digging a little deeper or reacting to what's happening in the moment, or that connecting of the dots between quant and qual, especially when they tell you two different things and then you figure out what does it mean in there. I think there's some things that AI can't do for us. Yeah. Any other thoughts around AI? I know everyone is concerned about what's going on with AI today. Is it going to eat our jobs? Is it going to make our jobs better?
I'd
Any
like to
positive thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to share. It's a bit of a positive and a bit of not, but just another thought. I have a lot of thoughts on AI, like just a bulleted list of things that are not totally connected. And one of them is this sort of back and forth I feel about, like, I want to use it. I want to know how it works. I want to understand it. It's going to show up in our designs. So I want to be proficient. And I've been experimenting with ways to sort of speed up workflows. Like, I had it just give me a base of a facilitator's guide for a workshop we're running. It wasn't perfect, but it was definitely a better starting point and saved me at least an hour of work. So that's been fun and that's been cool. But then there's also that pull of, I know it's really bad for the environment. There's a significant impact there that I think is getting sort of pushed under the rug. So there's that little bit of guilt, but then also that pressure to stay on top of it as a designer because it's here whether we like it or not. So like I said, it's more of just like a bunch of bullet point random thoughts that I have on AI, but that's more of just like a personal use sort of scenario that I'd like to share. I don't know if anybody else feels similarly about that.
What thoughts from the group?
Well, I don't know. I love working with AI. I work with it daily. And Naman, I don't think it will replace us. If you know, you could gather data in different ways. Obviously, you love working with people, you talk with people, you talk with your clients, and these conversations will never get lost. And I use AI on daily basis to like filter my thoughts. I feel I have ADHD. I have so many thoughts at the same time and I love to put them on paper and tell someone, can you sort my thoughts, please? And then you decide how are you going to use them. And then if you're missing some pieces of, you don't know, some data that's it's really critical for what you want to do, AI really helps me there to just give me this piece. And then I continue do my strategies, my work with clients. And if I have a specific goal and I have a fun project that I'm working on, it's not possible that AI is going to replace me. I hope, I hope in that way. But I love talking with it with AI and just give him my thoughts and ask, what do you think about this? Can you sort me this out? No, I don't agree with you, and this is my daily conversation. So if you use it that way, I don't think you're replaceable. You just have a second brain to work with.
Yeah, I love I was just putting in a chat too. I've kind of embraced it as a taskmaster or sometimes even a thought partner, just somebody I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
reel off a concept or
yeah.
an idea, or tell me everything that's wrong with this, or tell me what I'm missing or where my blinders are. If you've messed around with creating agents, like creating an agent in GPT that you can train. Um,
Yeah.
at my office here, we've got Copilot now, and so I've started playing with. And Copilot can actually go out into the ecosystem of your company's documentation, and so I can, ask it even the most simplest thing of, "Hey, there was this, research readout that we did 2 years ago on a project named this, but I have no idea what that document's called, but I want insights from that document." And, I can ask it more specific questions, and more often than not, it finds it, and it finds something of health. But, just asking it, what are the top things that I need to do in healthcare to have an impact for customers? It's, yeah, it's going to come up with all kinds of crazy things from who knows what sources. So, yeah. Okay, we're looking at time here, and I know we've got a few questions from our folks here. So let's do one last question for the panel here, and then we'll jump on some of the questions from the chat. So if you could pick one piece of advice for someone starting out in service design today, so this could be either early career or a career transition, but what would that piece of advice be? And whoever's ready to go, you can start. That way I don't have to put you on the spot.
I have one that's short and sweet. I would say don't get too attached to artifacts. I know we think so much about blueprints and maps and frameworks, but they're all really just tools. Like they're not the outcomes themselves. So you need to be good at navigating stakeholders, trying to figure out how to articulate and realize value, implement, collaborate. Like those are the skills that are harder to build and flex. So focus on that.
I love that. Who's got one?
Maybe I could continue. Sorry, go. Okay, I guess if I give one piece of advice, I would say to keep your skill sets really broad because, as we mentioned, I feel with AI, you could learn everything. And then it's on you to pick up the pieces to create the solution that you really want. And I love it how it started with one specific, like in sports, in soccer in Europe. One Dutch coach in the 70s decided to implement this system of total football. So each player can replace every other player's position and play their own field. And once I read it, I really loved that concept that, especially if you are in a small agency, you are working on a lot of things at the same time. And I feel this is the way that AI will never replace you because you are the one choosing the pieces that you need to resolve a specific problem. And this total football concept is something that I'm trying to implement in my managerial skills and pushing our developers and people I work with to talk with the clients, to code, to do a lot of things, and also to talk with ChatGPT on a daily basis, just to broaden their skill sets as much as possible because it really helps with critical thinking.
Now, I'm glad I had you go first because I think what you just said about keeping a broad skill set, I would also advise that. And for the reason that I feel like in design, we can get very caught up in titles. I think at least once a week on LinkedIn, I see this is what product design is, this is what UX is. And then people just fighting over the differences. But over at the end of the day, like we are just designers, we're creative problem solvers. Whether you specialize in UX, UI, service design, something else, really just focusing on the parts of design that you like, the parts that you're good at, and let that, instead of a title, rather lead you to the work you want to do. Because a service designer at one company is not going to be the same as a service designer at another. So really just focusing on that work. And again, like keeping that broad skill set and taking that open mindset to it.
Yeah, I agree totally with you.
Yeah, I used to joke that titles only matter to HR and LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly.
How about Naman and then Katrina?
Mine's really short. It's I have a previous mentor who I met in school who always used to say that success is a function of who you surround yourself with. And I think that just applies to everything, but also with regards to service design as I, reflect on my journey so far into transitioning into service design. I couldn't have done it if I hadn't been able to surround myself with people like Julia, Katrina, who I get to work with every day, because that just creates an environment where I can adopt a learning mindset and not be afraid to fail and learn from others. So that's what my advice would be.
I love that. Design your career.
Exactly.
All right, Katrina.
We'll give you a bonus one. I would say if you're considering, moving into service design and not sure, think about the types of things that you want to design, not which discipline sounds like most attractive by its definition, but what do you want to work on? And then that'll kind of guide you toward the right place to be.
Fantastic. So we got you are not your artifact. Keep your skill set, your a broad skill set. Success is about your environment and your support network, and follow your passions. That's some pretty good advice right there, I think. All right, Brandon, I think we've got a couple of questions from the chat to address before we close out.
Yeah, Silka asked the age-old question. We actually have a whole meetup about this question with Jared Spool. But let's ask this panelist group the same question. How would you define the difference between service design and experience design?
So
Well, I guess that's the question we were discussing. Who cares about labels at the end of the day? I mean, the last project I was doing, it's like I have a company that has an app for paying parking. It's the biggest parking provider in Croatia. And they asked us, how can we increase downloading the app and using the app, except like, okay, obviously changing the user experience of the product itself, what we can do. What we ended up doing now is we are going to an event where we are going to engage people that they're gonna have those little race cars that you race with, I don't know how do you call it, I'm missing a word, with remote controller. Yeah, exactly. And so that's the user experience we are having. They're going to race and then install the app and we're going to simulate the whole thing. So if you're asking me what is that called, if I didn't learn it in university, what I'm doing in my daily job, I don't know. So this broad thing is it the user experience, the service design, marketing, event planning, whatever. I don't think you should think about that. You should just think about how you could have fun, exciting projects and like resolve problems that you come across.
Thank you, Leah. Any others want to chime in on the difference between SD and XD?
Usually this is a pretty triggering topic. I thought we'd have some strong opinions here.
Yeah.
There isn't. I don't know. It depends who you ask. Check LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I don't actually have an articulate answer to that, to be honest. I think it's
Maybe
all.
we need some experienced designers.
I think that's how I introduced myself today, so maybe I'm a fraud, but yeah, I don't think it's all experience design. It's just how big is the experience.
And I think that's where it largely comes down to when you talk about this is it's a level of scale, scope, and macro versus micro, really, because essentially, like I mentioned in chat, how I discovered service design is through I was doing a UX job interview and it happened to be with Erica Flowers, and I was telling her, hey, I feel that UX is everything. A window is UX, the doors UX, the design of everyday things, essentially, kind of it. And everything is UX. And if everything's UX, then the tools that we're equipped with as UX designers can be used to design, frankly, just about anything. And Erica said, oh, you mean service design? And I was like, what's that? And we talked about it. And that's what turned me on to this practice in general. And so from that point on, it was learning the tools of this particular trade, which were a little bit different than UX a little bit, because I was thinking like this versus like that. So for me, they haven't really been overly different. It's just it broadened the kinds of things that as a practitioner I could tackle. Like you, Leah, when people ask me what is service design, one of the first things I tell them is you can design how to tell a patient they have cancer. You can design that experience to make it the best possible experience in this horrific event. How do I make that as best as I possibly can? And in so doing, you have effectively designed a service, whether it be walking through the drive-through or, walking through Starbucks or going through the drive-through at Chick-fil-A or whatever it may be. These are experiences. And so is it experience design? Is it service design? Again, I think you're all right that the labels are labels and they're effectively meaningless. Once you get beyond that and you just say, we've got tools, we're practitioners in tune with the human condition, and we are empathetic for the humans involved in these things, and we want to design great things for them, whether it be a service or an experience or whatnot. That's kind of my take on it.
Maybe I'll throw a provocation in there. What if we were all just designers and where we point it defines the type of design we're doing, but that is not our identity?
Yeah.
Right. If we think about
Yeah.
the takeaway points, we talked about broad skill set and you're not defined by the artifact. Maybe you're not even defined by the industry that you're applying the methodologies to. It's just if you apply it towards a digital touch point, yeah, you might be doing UX as a designer. But if you apply it to an organization, right, you might be doing org design or you might be doing service design. This is an interesting one too. I've joked even in my own organization too, as the service designers in healthcare, we're spending a whole lot of time doing strategy work as well as the discovery work that we do, related to service design. And the funny thing is the seat that we default have at the table is the designer seat, when in actuality, some of the value that we're bringing spans outside of that narrow definition, right? It's almost like the negative connotation of having designer in our title brings with it an assumption of what areas that we focus or what areas that we have value to contribute. And specifically for my team, in this case, we don't work on screens. We don't do wireframes. We're strictly, looking at the bigger picture operationally and behind the scenes. So that's, kind of an interesting thing that even the title design has a challenge with it of, folks who don't do what we do, don't know where to put us.
I hear echoes of Mark Stickdorn in our very, very first remote meetup that we ever had, where he says, I don't care what you call it.
Yeah.
You can call it business design. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Just do the job. Right. And to that end, I remember that clear as a bell because it helped me kind of relinquish the need for titles. Early on in my career, it was super critical. I was trying to define who I was. Was I an IXD? What's the difference between interaction design and user experience design? Whole debates can be held on that. I was building RIAs at the time, rich internet applications. Well, what's the difference between an RIA and a website in 2025? Nothing, right? It's all the same thing. And so I think over time, I think the title and the name of the thing becomes less important. And I think, Robin, you touched on something really critical was what is the target? What is the thing I'm doing right now at this moment, which might be different from what I'm doing tomorrow. So the title is irrelevant. And it's really just about I understand humans and I can solve problems, what be they business problems or design problems or website or service or whatever it may be.
Fantastic. This actually full circle with the Mark Stickdorn and then full circle back to SDGC 25. Exactly what we're talking about right now is going to be one of the topics covered at the global conference coming up in October. Let me see if I can get my screen to come back up with that. And for those of you who maybe joined a little bit later, we had a discount code for the conference specifically for today and those who joined us on the call. So I think we can get that up.
Yep, got
I
it.
don't know if, Zoom is not letting me pull the deck back up, but yes, there's so much information. If you haven't been connected with our promos on LinkedIn, then reach out to any one of us and we can share anything about the conference here in Dallas. And we actually have a keynote, a pair, Peter Merholtz, Jesse James Garrett, former Adaptive Path founders, co-founders, are actually going to be sharing a whole lot of insights about kind of the future of where they think the design industry is going, design leadership, design careers. So should be right on top of what we've been discussing.
Awesome. Good job.
All right. Well,
Good job, panelists. Thank you all for joining.
100%. And thanks for those of you who stuck around through the whole time past 1 o'clock. Really appreciate you guys joining.
Thank you so much for having us.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.